They say you can't cheat death, but if anyone was going to try, it would be Tony de Angelis, the man who once swindled American Express for $175 million with nothing but empty vegetable oil tanks and audacity. The year is 1985, 22 years after his empire collapsed, 22 years after he walked out of a New Jersey warehouse in handcuffs, leaving behind the biggest commodity fraud in American history. Wall Street had moved on. The scandal was a footnote. Tony de Angelis was yesterday's news. But here's what they never tell you about con men. They don't stop being con men just because they go to prison. They don't wake up reformed. And Tony de Angelis? He was about to prove that the greatest deception of his life wasn't the Salad Oil scandal. It was convincing everyone, including himself, that he could outrun his past. November 1963. While America reeled from Kennedy's assassination, another American institution was bleeding: American Express. De Angelis's fraud had exposed a hole so massive that the company's stock plummeted 40% in a single day. Banks collapsed, brokerage houses shuttered, 2 commodities firms vanished overnight. Tony got 7 years. He served 5. When he walked out of prison in 1972, he was 60 years old, broke, notorious, unemployable. Most men would disappear, open a small business, live quietly. Tony de Angelis opened a meat processing plant. By 1985, he was back in Bayonne, New Jersey, the same city where his salad oil empire had risen and fallen. He lived modestly in a small house on Avenue C, just miles from the Allied crude vegetable oil warehouses that had once made him a king. His second wife, Anna, stood by him. His children had scattered, some changing their names to escape the shadow of his infamy. Neighbors remembered him as polite, quiet, always impeccably dressed despite having little money. He'd wave from his porch, chat about the weather, feed the neighborhood cats. But something was eating at Tony de Angelis. What the neighbors didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that Tony had been keeping secrets even from his own family. In early 1985, Anna noticed changes. Tony, always robust despite his 73 years, was losing weight. His suits hung loose, his face grew gaunt. When she asked, he brushed it off. Stress, he'd say, the business. But there was no business, not really. The meat processing operation barely broke even. What Anna didn't know was that for months, Tony had been making quiet trips to a clinic in Manhattan, alone, always alone. He'd take the bus, disappearing for hours, returning with nothing but evasive answers. The doctors had found something in his stomach, something aggressive: gastric cancer. Here's the twist. Tony refused treatment, not because he couldn't afford it, though money was tight, not because he was afraid. This was a man who'd bluffed billion-dollar banks without breaking a sweat. He refused because accepting treatment meant accepting something Tony de Angelis had never accepted in his entire life: defeat. Summer 1985. Tony's condition worsened, but he told no one, not his wife, not his children. He'd perfected the art of the poker face over 6 decades of hustling, and he wasn't about to crack now. But he was planning something. In July, Tony made a series of unusual phone calls. He contacted an old associate from his Allied crude days, a man who'd survived the scandal and quietly rebuilt his life. The conversation was cryptic. Tony asked about settling old debts, about making things right. The associate was confused. The statute of limitations had long passed. There were no debts to settle. Or were there? What Tony never told anyone, not the prosecutors, not his lawyers, not even in his testimony, was that some of the money from the Salad Oil fraud had never been recovered. Roughly $3 million in 1963, worth more than $20 million in 1985. Investigators had searched for years, found nothing. Eventually, they stopped looking. But Tony knew where it was. Here's what makes this haunting. In his final months, Tony became obsessed with the idea of giving it back. Not out of remorse. Tony never apologized for the con, not really. He'd call it business. But from something stranger. Legacy. He wanted to be remembered as more than a thief. October 15th, 1985. Tony collapsed in his Bayonne home. Anna called an ambulance. By the time they reached Bayonne Hospital, Tony was barely conscious. The cancer had spread. Liver, pancreas, lungs. The doctors gave him days. Anna finally understood. Her husband had been dying for months, and he'd hidden it with the same skill he'd once used to hide empty oil tanks. But here's where the story takes its final, devastating turn. On October 16th, barely 24 hours before his death, Tony did something extraordinary. He asked for a lawyer. Not his defense attorney from the trial, that man was long dead. A new lawyer, someone he'd never met before. The young attorney arrived expecting a simple will. What he got instead was a confession. For 3 hours, fighting through pain and morphine, Tony dictated instructions, locations, bank names, account numbers, a roadmap to the missing $3 million. But there was a condition. The money could only be distributed after a very specific set of contingencies were met. Contingencies so convoluted, so elaborate, that the lawyer would later describe it as the most complex set of contingencies I'd ever seen outside of a trust for royalty. Tony Angelis, dying in a New Jersey hospital, was pulling off one final con. But the con wasn't theft. It was something far stranger. October 17th, 1985, 2:47 a.m. Tony Angelis died alone in his hospital room. Anna had gone home to rest. The lawyer had left hours before, head spinning with Tony's instructions. A nurse found him, eyes open, staring at the ceiling tiles. The death certificate listed gastric adenocarcinoma as the cause. Simple, clinical, true, but incomplete. Because here's what the lawyer discovered when he tried to execute Tony's instructions. The accounts were real, the money was real, but the conditions Tony had set, those Byzantine, impossible contingencies, were designed to ensure the money would never actually be distributed. Not to his family, not to his victims, not to anyone. The contingencies required verifications from banks that no longer existed, signatures from executives who died decades before, approvals from regulatory bodies that had been dissolved. Tony Angelis spent his final hours on Earth ensuring the missing millions would remain missing forever. Why? The lawyer found his answer in a sealed letter Tony had left behind. Just 3 sentences in Tony's own handwriting. They wanted to know where the money went. Now they'll know it existed. Let them chase ghosts the way I chased dreams. Even in death, Tony Angelis refused to give anyone the satisfaction of closure. Tony Angelis was buried in Holy Cross Cemetery in North Arlington, New Jersey. Modest headstone, small funeral. The newspapers ran brief obituaries. Salad Oil Swindler dies at 73, and moved on. The money? Still missing. The lawyer reported Tony's confession to authorities, but without actionable information, the investigation went nowhere. Some believe the accounts never existed, that Tony's deathbed confession was one last fiction, one last middle finger to the system that caged him. Others think the money is still out there, waiting. Anna Angelis never spoke publicly about her husband's final days. She died in 1992, taking whatever secrets she knew to her own grave. Here's the thing about great con men. They understand that the con isn't about the money. It's about the story, the myth, the legend that outlives the man. Tony Angelis died the way he lived, performing. The cause of death was cancer, but the real ending, that's still a mystery. And somewhere, somehow, you have to believe Tony would be smiling about that. To this day,
approximately $3 million from the Allied crude vegetable oil scandal remains unaccounted for.
Like and subscribe for more Americans' most notorious financial crimes and scams.